Ladies and gents, what a pleasure to welcome back the absolute best Cincinnati Bengals beat writer, reporter, extraordinaire, podcaster, Paul Dehner Jr. of The Athletic, and of a podcast. We were talking offline about it. It is taking over the world, Paul. Your
I don't know about that.
podcast by leaps and bounds. We joined forces for some live shows
Yeah.
in Cincinnati and here in Buffalo, and which was great because when we did it here in Buffalo ahead of that playoff game a couple years back, you told your listeners, and I feel like Fatty Beer in Orchard Park, it was like 70-30, and that's probably conservative. 70-30 Bengals fans, which tells you everything you need to know about Paul's following. But man, great to have
Yeah.
you back on the show.
Great to have you back. We got to do that again sometime and be drinking some fatty beers in the process. I could go back to that world. That was a good time. Bengals fans would go back to that day quickly too. Things have gone a touch sideways since that weekend. It was the high point, and since then it's not been super.
As much as I'd love to talk about our children and the weather and life, because you are one of my best buds in this biz, we got to get right down to brass tacks because
Yeah.
holy hell, where do you start with the Cincinnati Bengals? I mean, this is the team we picked to go along to get to the Super Bowl, win it. The reasoning being Joe Burrow is going to light the NFL on fire. You look at what he does when adversity strikes, right? Tears his ACL, goes to the Super Bowl the next year. He did his part, led the NFL in passing yards, touchdowns, plays out of his mind. This offense, statistically and arguably just the best in the NFL. And you don't even join the 44% club. So I guess we start with the defense, which was fairly defenseless. Is that where we go, Paul?
Yeah. I don't know how you start anywhere else. That's it. I mean, if this team had the 23rd best defense in football last year, they might have been able to win the AFC. I mean, they were dangerous late in the season. I mean, they had won five in a row. Burrow was doing Burrow stuff at the end of the year. I mean, he was playing at I don't think, for people that don't watch the Bengals every week, you just see the highlights. I don't think it'll be properly appreciated what he was doing. I mean, his level of playmaking was off the charts. His level of decision making and making the smart decision was off the charts. He was playing almost flawless football. You had a triple crown winner at receiver. You had T. Higgins having a career year. Chase Brown was the breakout running back star, maybe in the league. And he was doing it with two guards that couldn't block, uh, and losing their best tight end to injury, having to shift their entire offensive strategy that they had shifted towards Eric All, and move away from that on the fly mid-season, and still make it all work. And there they were, winning games and gaining confidence. They couldn't get in because they had a defense that was so putrid. I mean, truly historical stuff where they couldn't stop a soul, where they were just losing games where they score 33, 35, 38 points. It's no one in the league is losing these games. Truly, like 98% winning percentage going on, and they had four losses in these types of games. It's crazy stuff that was going on. You lose to the Ravens by a field goal in overtime at home when you score 38. You lose 35-34 in Baltimore on a Thursday night where Burrow just cooks. It's one of those things where if you just have any kind of defense, you're talking about them in the same breath as you were talking about Josh Allen in Buffalo, as you were talking about what was going on in Kansas City. Like, they had the ability to be that with what they were doing offensively, but they didn't. They didn't, and it fell apart. And now there's a whole lot of questions, and they're entering the meaty part of their business that is pretty ugly right now. And they've got to figure out a way to put it back together.
So many games to point to, Paul. I mean, I'm thinking of
It's crazy.
44-38 loss to Pittsburgh, watching that one
Yeah,
start to finish. Russell Wilson looks like peak Russell Wilson.
unbelievable.
414 yards, three touchdowns, lighten it up. Is this the team that can threaten the Chiefs and the Bills in the AFC? Well, I and anybody else that bought into the Steelers at that point should have realized, look at the defense, look at the Bengals. So where did it go wrong? Like, because you mentioned that playoff game against the Bills, and shit, I remember driving down there to Cincinnati ahead of that AFC Championship game, talking to those defensive players. You had talent, you had swagger, you had playmakers. Lou Anarumo, we're talking about him kind of like we're talking about, Spags and Fangio, the best defensive minds in the sport. How did it go so wrong, so fast? Is it? I imagine it's a lot of things. It does seem like Lou was hesitant to play rookies, young players. You got maybe some
Yep.
veterans out there like Sheldon Rankins. I mean, guys that just really shouldn't be on the field for 50, 60 snaps when a team like the Eagles, like they play those rookies, Quinion Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, and just play rookies, go through your growing pains of September. The payoff come January could be massive. Maybe that's one reason, but I imagine there's many reasons. You go from swagger, Mike Hilton saying, see y'all in Burrowhead to
Mm-hmm.
who do you even have on defense that you want to keep in 2025?
They, both sides. So Lou Anarumo gets let go after this year. I would say that Pittsburgh game you mentioned midseason was the day that he lost his job. I mean, if he was hanging on to it by a thread, it was gone that day. Russell Wilson can't throw for 420 some yards, and you score 38 points on offense, and it's not enough against those Steelers. I mean, that's crazy. They were. This was this is December, right?
At home.
It's at home. It's one thing to be bad the first month of the season when you're trying to fit some new pieces and, like you mentioned, growing pains and that stuff together, and you're learning what you got. You had months to figure this out. Months coming off a bye week with a must-win type game at home, and the effort was terrible. The same thing they played 2 weeks before that, but on the front end of the bye week in LA on Sunday Night Football, massive game. They let the Chargers go up and down the field in the first half like you haven't seen them do all year. It was a total egg laying defensively in the first half. Non-effort stuff. Okay, like that is a team that was not into it and totally unenthused by anything that their coordinator was selling. And the message was not getting home. He's rotating everyone. Everyone's mad. Young players aren't playing enough. Old guys are frustrated because their time's getting cut back. Like, it was a disaster. And the system wasn't fitting. And so you had two sides. One, I'm sure Lou's side, arguing these young players you gave me stink, right? They have 9 top 100 picks that they gave Lou Anarumo. They said, look, we're paying offense now. Okay. We had Joe, we're gonna have to pay Jamar, we've got all this, so we put money into the line, and all these things. We've got to turn it over and go young on defense. They kept veterans. I mean, it's not like they didn't pay. They had one of the highest paid defenses and one of the highest paid defensive lines in football, and the biggest weakness on their team was a defensive line. And it wasn't just that. They had picks, top picks, premium picks, 9 top 100 picks behind veteran starters. Like, how you build it. Like, it's how you want to build it. You want to have those guys. So if they do get old, the young guy takes over, and those ships pass themselves in the night. None of those picks developed. In fact, most of them regressed. And so when that happens and you don't get anything out of Myles Murphy, when Cam Taylor-Britt gets benched in a year you thought he was going to become a Pro Bowler, when Dax Hill is in his 3rd position in 3 years and tears his ACL when he was coming on an outside corner, when DJ Turner gets benched and he loses a preseason battle, like Jordan Battle comes in thinking he's going to be the guy in year 2 at safety, but they re-signed Von Bell because there wasn't enough confidence. And Von Bell, who they let go because they thought he was too slow, they bring back to be slower and older and play in front of their young guy. And so he has no confidence. His confidence is shot. So he's overweight. He's not interested when the season starts. This stuff compounds itself. They screwed up in free agency and didn't get a defensive tackle to help fill the DJ Reader role when he left. And when that happens, well, you have to throw a couple of picks at it. They were pigeonholed into taking defensive tackles in the draft. They kind of stretch and take McKinley Jackson in the 4th round. They take Chris Jenkins in the 2nd round. You're counting on rookies to immediately contribute to a bad situation. Then the Sheldon Rankins disaster happens where they pay him $13 million and he's uninterested. He looked like a guy that thought he was going to retire and was just happy to collect the paycheck when they threw it at him. That's how it falls apart, right? That's it. When none of these guys develop and the older guys fall apart or fail, that's how you end up with a historically bad defense. That if it just would have been anything other than historically bad, you would have been a team that could have been one to reckon with in the playoffs.
All that was missing there, Paul, was a scalpel in one of your hands, you know, a doctor's suit, and you're just
That's
kind
it.
of like going through the cadaver. All right, what the
That's
hell is
it.
going
What
on?
do we got here? I mean, we've
Gloves,
we've done it.
mask.
I have
Oh,
dissected this. I
gotta
have
go take a
dissected
shower.
this corpse before. I've dissected
Yes.
this corpse before.
What does it look like?
It's pretty
When
ugly.
Sheldon Rankins, you're in that locker room every day. What does it look like when a dude like that is just checked out, collecting a paycheck?
Well, he had maybe the greatest introductory press conference I've ever been a part of, and then was just nothing, offered nothing after that, on the field, off the field, denying interviews. And not only that, like, it certainly from our angle appeared to be poisoning the young players to deny interviews and be like, and just be generally negative and kind of pissed off and jaded, right? Like, and they felt like a team whose young guys felt pissed off and jaded before they even took a snap, right? It just, everybody seemed uninterested in the situation, and it only got worse as the season got worse. And so you end up in this spot where they're at now, where Lou Anarumo is going to get scapegoated. I don't think Lou Anarumo forgot how to coach. I don't think he suddenly doesn't know ball. I think that he'll probably do fairly well in Indianapolis. I think Lou Anarumo specializes in more complicated schemes with veterans. That's what they did in 21 and 22 when they brought in Mike Hilton and Von Bell and Trey Hendrickson, and they signed Pratt to a second deal, and they had Wilson getting, they Chido Awuzie. They had a lot of older players who still had in the tank, but he wasn't really asked to develop young players, and he did really well with that group. Man, did they gel, right? And Jesse Bates leaves, and that was a big hit. And when he had to turn over those young players into the next generation and be one of these young, energetic defenses, like you saw the Eagles be this past year, the Rams, like just have to do it when you're in certain situations. Finding the Chiefs, you have to do that. He just didn't, right? And that doesn't mean that he necessarily is unable to. He just didn't. He didn't connect with any of these guys in terms of getting them to play better. It wasn't happening. It wasn't connecting. So what do? They go to somebody whose career is a specialization in developing young players. Al Golden is has been a college star on the defensive side of the ball. And when he's been in the NFL, done great work there when he was in Detroit. And then people forget he came to Cincinnati and was there for his first thing he did was the 2020 draft. They took 3 rookie linebackers in that draft. They all developed. Logan Wilson, Jermaine Pratt, was on that roster. Logan Wilson, Akeem Davis Gaither, and Marcus Bailey were the 3 picks, and they just had Pratt, who had been selected the year earlier. They gave him this super young room. Those linebackers shined as young players. They were a big part of that Super Bowl defense being so good. And then he goes to Notre Dame and turns them into one of the best defenses in football. He's playing a bunch of freshmen. He's working the guys in the portal to bring in. He's developing them. You see that and you say, okay, can you do that here? This ain't Notre Dame, but it's the same idea. They have to lean into young players playing better. All those names, all those top 100 picks I mentioned, plus there's probably going to be about 3 more thrown on his lap after this draft, have to become the soul of this defense, and they have to become a thing. And so there's a lot on Al Golden's plate, but that's the reaction to feeling like that plan didn't work because Lou wasn't quite able to get it out of him. Let's bring in somebody whose specialty is getting it out of them.
Right, because it's one thing for us to say, Lou, whoever, play the young guys, let them learn. But then you got to look at those young guys, and maybe some of these players just aren't good too. I'd be a little worried. I mean, I remember when they drafted Miles Murphy, Bob McGinn has his draft series here at Go Along, and that was one of the stories that made waves when he dropped the D line. I just had to pull it up. The headline that we had: "Why the Clemson curse quote scares the shit out of the NFL." And
Yeah.
a lot of NFL scouts, execs just absolutely rip Dabo Swinney and Clemson for not being forthcoming when it comes to giving them the real shit on their players, the good, the bad, the ugly. Like everything was too flowery, everything's too rosy. And let's see. Yeah, here's one scout. Dabo's the worst. You go to pro day and he talks about everyone on the team as if they're the next great NFL player. It's like, come on, man. He talks about the fifth year senior that hasn't played, and he's talking about he should be a starter in the NFL. He's so full of shit. That whole culture says a lot about a team and the players, pampering players, making excuses for them, enabling certain things with players. And they didn't really have nice things to say about Miles Murphy, the player. A lot of nice things to say about him as a person, but
Yeah.
let's see. Yeah, this is this is another scout. I should link to this. He goes, quote, "You just wonder how wired he is. He's not wired poorly. He's a great kid. There's something missing. You expect more. He showed up at the combine wearing glasses and talking about his engineering degree. What's
Mm.
the most difficult thing you've had to overcome? Oh man, my freshman year, 2 days at Clemson. We go. So it goes on and on. I think you watch the Eagles just beat the snot out of the Chiefs. They've got players on the D line specifically with bad intentions. You're around Miles Murphy. Who is he as a player? I mean, because
Mm.
not to just pick on him, but he was a
Yeah.
top pick. That you want to play young players, but you need those young players to be good too.
They, you know, they're in this situation with Trey Hendrickson right now. Um, this is a spot they knew they'd be in. They knew Sam Hubbard was getting older. They knew who retired this week. They knew Trey Hendrickson. They had to extend him another year partially. They knew that they had more guys that needed to come into the pipeline. But they drafted Miles Murphy when it was like, man, I don't see a totally clear path. You just extended Hendrickson a year because they knew like all this stuff was coming down the line, and they needed to be ahead of it. It's the smart play. Like that's just it. It's felt like they've done everything by the book and how you do successfully sustain. You do pay your players. You do invest in the right places. You do draft behind them, and you do draft a year early and give them time to develop in the background. But when those guys don't hit, you're left to look like an idiot. And Murphy, I I don't think I think what you said sounds right. Like knowing Miles a little bit, I think the consensus here is they'd like to see a little more dog in him, in terms of how he approaches the game of football, not necessarily on the field, but just like it needs to eat at him more. It needs to be and there. I don't have a problem with as a person. It's great, like to be who he is. Like it's
Right.
but the guys that go out there on the field and get it done and that scare other teams, I don't know that he has that. He's got to prove that he has that in him. He's got to find that. He has all the traits. He doesn't finish. He doesn't have that extra strain. There's just a little something missing in his game right now. I'm like bullish on him. I still believe. I just think that those once you figure it out and you really are given the opportunity to play. So like I went through a bunch of the first and second round picks over the last like 5 years, edge rushers, and their win rates and pressure rates and snap counts. And Miles over just over the first 2 years of their career. So like, what does the early days look like for these guys? And he was right in the middle. Like his pressure rate, win rate was like right in the middle of everybody, which is probably better than people would think for a dude with no sacks last year. His snap count, his snaps were in the bottom 5 or 10. Like he didn't play much. So when that's the case, you don't get an opportunity to do the one thing. These guys can't go out and practice finishing. Jerry Montgomery, who's new Bengals line coach, is like, it is the most undercoached thing in the sport is defensive linemen finishing because they can't do it. Do that around even any of the quarterbacks. Okay. Like do that around any of these quarterbacks and you're dead in practice. Like you can't do it in the offseason. You only get that in the game to truly be able to finish with reckless abandon. And that's what Murphy needs. And he hasn't gotten enough snaps. And I think that's why everywhere you've heard Duke Tobin talk about Miles Murphy, it's been he'll get there when he plays more. He just needs to play more. That's been their thoughts on him. And I don't know if he's going to get to some of the things that I thought maybe he would develop into, but you've seen flashes. Like as a rookie, the tail end of his rookie year, he was really coming on. He was making plays. You were seeing him every game. and you're like, okay, he had an injury the first half of last year, and it just never quite got there, and he stayed in the doghouse and didn't get enough snaps. So I'm still think there's hope there, but you're right. Like it does feel like a guy that's not that scouting report rings partially true.
New coach, new scheme, more
Yeah,
snaps. Maybe the lights turn on too. Maybe that's an
it's
example
not
to
a traits
use.
thing. It's not because he doesn't have the physical skills to do it. You know, he's got all that. So
The Bills are in the same sort of plight to when you win, you know, 10 to 13 games, you're picking at the bottom of the first round. Brandon Beane's talked about it several times. It's hard to just get an A level defensive player down there. But I don't know. Sometimes you pull up these drafts. I get it, hindsight's 2020, all of that. But even that draft with Miles Murphy, I mean, Nolan Smith is taken by the Eagles a few picks later. Joey
mm-hmm.
Porter Jr.'s at 32. Then you go down to Brian Branch at 45. You know, he's the do-it-all guy for Detroit. So you can get some studs in that range still, and
Yeah,
you gotta hit because you're gonna be in that predicament with a Trey Hendrickson. You know what's coming, and now we'll get to him in these decisions. But I think you just gave me a great idea with these practices and not being able to finish. What if there's like a borderline UFL NFL level quarterback that can just serve as a designated crash test dummy? You know what I mean? Like for practices. I don't know what you
AJ
pay him.
McCarron is personally offended by your plan.
But
We're going to bring
somebody
AJ in from the St. Louis Battlehawks, and we're going to
bring him
let
in.
Miles Murphy practice finishing on him. Sounds
They got
great.
to be good enough to
Somebody would do
execute a
it.
scout
Everybody's got
team.
their price, TD.
Yeah,
Everybody's
that's
got
what I'm
their price.
saying. I mean, it's not like you're picking up a homeless person off the street. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of people out there who'd be okay, getting their bell rung in a practice, but you need that player to be good enough to execute the other team's, plays, a scout team quarterback. But you pay him a pretty penny and you just say, all right, D line, you can finish on this player. The red jersey's off. It's open season. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Good luck on
Honestly.
that. Good luck on that. I like that. Yeah. Just pull somebody from the sidewalk out onto the
Yeah,
field.
maybe not that, but there's probably somebody out there. Yeah, they not quite ready to hang it up. They still got that itch to play football, and
There's ways you can do it. Like, and you could put any number. I mean, you can put a bag out there or whatever. You can get one of these remote control, bag. I don't care. The bottom is just different in the game with a real dude, especially these quarterbacks in the league now, Lamar Jacksons of the world. Like, you're going to end up looking like a fool chasing these dudes down and trying to pull these guys down if you don't really know how to do it once you maybe do win. And he didn't do a good enough job of finishing in that regard. And so, yeah, I mean, there's so many implications to the change in the practice rules that, the teams that are smart and find ways, any way to get some of the same skill set out of these trench players in the offseason is an advantage. It's just so hard. It is
yeah,
so hard to truly develop linemen now on the offensive and defensive line anymore that you get a league where the line play on offensive line in particular is bad, and every year it takes 5-6 weeks for it feels like these lines and offenses to really totally get everything going just because they're or tackling to be what it needs to be because there's just not enough practicing on that stuff.
it's a hard balance as well because I mean Detroit, they're the number one seed in the NFC. Dan Campbell's football is just different than everybody else's football. But I was talking to a player a few weeks ago who really believes all the injuries that they had in Detroit. Now, no two injuries are the same, but he's like, there's a reason all those guys are going down in Detroit. Like they practice hard, like
So
really hard, which is good, but then bad. You don't want guys to get hurt.
this is a really, really important topic in the Bengals conversation right now. So this is one that all the coaches internally have been grinding over and trying to figure out. They have started slow every year, right? They just every year. Now, partially that is Burrow has never been right day one. Not one time really in his career here. This past year, he still was dealing with the wrist. That's why they lose to New England in week one. But there was a lot of stuff. They weren't tackling well, whatever. But they have been one of the best teams down the stretch every year. They have, and they've been healthy. In the years that they've made runs, they've They've been healthy. They've been playing their best football. Guys have felt fresh late in the season. Meanwhile, the Steelers every year, they go straight down in the tank in December, right? Because they play so hard in camp, right? And it's not, there's balances that can be made, but the Bengals are saying it has to change. We can't keep being this bad early. So what do? Where's that balance? Is it more live tackling? Is it just strictly more preseason game reps? Is it just going to be as simple as making sure Burrow's healthy? But how do you do that and not become Marvin Lewis's Bengals used to be? He would beat them up in camp, and they were dead by the time they got to the end of the season, and he was 0-7 in the postseason. And they were always a team that looked like they were on their last legs when they hit January. Well, in 21 and 22, the Bengals looked like a team that were on their first legs when they hit January. I mean, they were really fresh. And that is Zach Taylor's philosophy. That's been his philosophy since he said that in his introductory press conference. That was a Rams belief. And so where is the balance? They're fighting that battle now of how do we still get to that feeling in January, but not miss out on January because we played so poorly in September. And I mean, and not tackle like ass for 5 weeks. And so it's like, where's that balance? And coaches everywhere. And I know the Bengals are really fighting this right now on what does that need to look like? How do you find that common ground with your team? Because they take care of them in season. They're easy on them during the year too. Their camps, I call them country club Bengals in the offseason. Like they don't even use the minimum. But they barely are out there. They don't do hardly anything during the OTAs. They would just hardly do any. I mean, literally nothing. No live, no 7-on-7. Like it was just basically used to hang out and do meetings and like walk through stuff, especially with scrubs. And so that's fine, man. Like, but it's hard to marry those two. It's hard to marry that you start slow every year and that your country club Bengals in the spring. So like, what does that look like? I don't know. I think that I'm curious to see what that routine looks like this year.
Rex Ryan had the slogan in the offseason, all in. I think Sean McDermott at one point had playoff caliber, then championship caliber. I think Paul Dehner Jr. just coined the 2025 Cincinnati Bengals. Let's not tackle like ass. That's it. That's the Bengals offseason slogan right there.
If they didn't tackle like ass, they might have been in the AFC Championship game. That's it.
Let's
or just not tackle like ass for like 2 weeks less. If they just could have started not tackling like ass in like November,
right,
then they would have been okay. They would have beaten the Chargers.
Let's not tackle like ass for 2 weeks less.
Let's not tackle like ass. That's the shirt. Put it on the wall. Yeah, I like that. We'll put it. You get the slogan. Everybody can start reciting it. This year, we're not tackling like ass. That's going to be what it's going to be. If they would have done that, I mean, it's so crazy because you do any one of those crazy games that we talked about. But like, let's just use that Pittsburgh game where they were somehow on December 5th still tackling like ass. If you just use just that game, they're in the AFC North race till the end because you have Baltimore and Pittsburgh are coming back. They're in the playoffs. Pittsburgh's not in, right? Pittsburgh is one game back, and it changes. The Bengals are in the playoffs. I mean, they missed by the Chiefs not trying in Week 18. They are in, and they might be even a higher seed than 7 potentially, depending on how some other things would have broken. Like that's just one game in December, and they lost 7 games like that. And so, just got to find some kind of a way to be a little bit better on that side.
Right. Because there is an argument to be made for getting hot at the right time, being healthy at the right time. And this offense nobody wanted to play the Bengals. I mean, that was real. I know it kind of became a comical thing on social media, but I think teams to a man, you hook them up to lie detector tests. Andy Reid, Sean McDermott, pick your coach in the AFC. They don't want to play the Bengals at that point of the year.
No one wants to see Burrow in the postseason, and no one wanted to see Lou Anarumo for all the heat that he took. One thing he has in his bag is he's been a great big game planning coach. Like he has done that in the postseason his entire career, to the best of them, to Patrick Mahomes, to Josh Allen. Maybe his best game plan of all time was what he did that the last time we hung out and did that live show that weekend. That was one of his, masterpieces, honestly. And so no one wanted that part of that either, as that defense started to kind of find itself in its simplicity. So you're right. But none of that means jack. None of that means jack. They were just one of the teams on the outside, and now they've got all the questions, and everybody's feeling the pressure.
All right, let's start with Trey Hendrickson then. What happens there?
Okay. I think he gets traded. Is where I fall on it. I think when push comes to shove, I think that's the smart move personally. I mean, I've been team trade Trey Hendrickson camp for a while now. Not because he's not good or not worth it. He's going into, he's in his age 30, age 31, 32. He's in his last year. You would be talking about needing to extend him through his age 32, 33, 34 season for an edge rusher. You want no part of that. Okay. We've seen the graphs. We know what they look like at that point
Billy
for
Willis
edge rushers.
Released 24 hours ago.
Right. The edge rushers in this league, there's just, I went through the last 5 years, the top 10 edges in pass rush grade, just pass rush grade. Okay. And their age on September 1. Okay. And I had the whole list. I'm like, I'm doing this for visual effect because it's the internet. And I had all 50 of them with their sorted by age. And you get down to the very bottom, and there were just 3 that were older than Trey Hendrickson is going to be on day 1. It doesn't happen, man. The game has changed. You got to be the freakiest freak to play that position now. Like, you got to be unbelievable. And the moment you hit and you have a little less on that twitch, you're just not the same producer. There's very few. Some, like Von Miller, could have a year, right? Well, he was the freakiest of the freaks when he come out, right? Khalil Mack had a year. Well, one of the freakiest of the absolute freaks. Trey Hendrickson's a lot of things, and he's great. And I think he probably has one more really good year in him. He's not that. He didn't make it by being that, those types of guys. And so I'm buying more that, and maybe you're sacrificing more in the immediate, but I'm buying more that a low second round pick in this draft over the next 3 years is going to give me more than Trey Hendrickson is, especially when you throw in the fact that I'm taking that, whatever you're giving him, $30+ million per year, and distributing that back across my team. This team has so many holes, TD. Like, they have to fill so many. They have to backfill. They need players. Like, all those, we don't know how many of these guys are actually going to pan out. They need players. They need to be able to fill with talent. They need to give Joe what he wants to. They're paying Jamar. He's going to be the highest paid non-quarterback. He's probably going to make almost $40 million, if not more, per year. T's probably going to end up around 30. Like, Joe's in one of the biggest contracts in the league. Like, you have to be able to offset that somewhere. You can get something in a defensive line strong draft right now, and clear some money to be able to, whether it's partially be towards paying your guys, going towards fixing this defense. To me, that's where this probably ends when push comes to shove, because Trey Hendrickson he's unhappy with his contract always. This has been the case since he's been here, pretty much. Like, since he had his first great year, and the Bengals have been on a bargain deal. They gave him an extension. He signed it. He was still mad the next year that it should be more. He's second place voting for Defensive Player of the Year. He does deserve more money, but he did sign that extension. But do you want him to come in and be pissed off all the time, and another year of people complaining and holding in, and is Trey going to play, and all the distractions that come with that, plus who knows what else? I'd rather just clear it out and have a clean approach to the season and go young on defense. They had him last year with 17.5 sacks, and they sucked. So maybe try just throwing more young pieces at it, and try to quickly Rams or Eagles this thing. Like, that's kind of the way where I'm at with it. And they could pay them all, but at what cost? It's not a matter of money. It's a matter of philosophy in my mind. And I think for me, they eventually end up there. Or they could do the Bengals thing and force him to play it out and bitch and complain the whole way, which seems to happen a lot around here.
You're right, because I think if you hear what Paul just said at first, it sounds like a take quake. What? Like trade Trey Hendrickson for a second round
Yeah.
pick when he gave you 17 and a half sacks in back to back
Yeah.
years and he's your one talent on that side of the ball? But you're absolutely right. I think you don't want to mess with the offense. You want to keep that thing intact as long as possible. Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, you know, keep that. That is your ticket to the Super Bowl year in and year out. And then if you, I don't even know if it's possible. Like if you did pay Trey Hendrickson on top of that, you're basically you're trying to be like the 2010 Miami Heat, right? With LeBron, Bosh, and Wade. I had to pull up their roster because I remember them filling out a roster after they did that. Look at some of
Yeah.
these names that were on that team. You had Zydrunas Ilgauskas still kicking around,
Oh,
Mike
yeah. There you
Bibby in
go.
year 12, Eric Dampier in year 14, Jerry Stackhouse in year 15, and Juwan Howard in year 16. So, I mean, if you even can pay everybody, who in the hell else are you going to have on defense? Like, are they going to have open
Yeah.
tryouts? Does Paul line
Yeah.
up as an inside linebacker?
You don't want to see that. But I mean, I just think it's also a matter of you're going young, go young, like go all the way young, and don't hamstring yourself in the ability to do that. Because you can go out and you can add, a 25 or 26-year-old edge rusher who maybe is more on the come in free agency, and rather than hang on to what Trey is going to be able to give you going forward. And again, like Trey is a great. There's a reason I think he would fetch a premium. The Chiefs just did this with Joe Tooney, the exact same thing. They just did the exact same thing with Joe Tooney. He had 1 year left on his deal. He's 32. He's an all-pro. He's still a great player, but they knew they weren't going to be able to extend him. They knew they needed to continue to churn for picks and clear the deck for other younger players to take over that and all that stuff. At some point, you have to do that, and they did. He actually has the same exact money left, actually, 1 year, $16 million on Tooney's contract. It's the same idea, but at a more premium position and a more high profile because Hendrickson's been more high profile and things like that. It's what proactive, smart GMs do. It's old school Belichick school of trading Richard Seymour when he has 1 more year left or whatever. They said that every year you saw the Patriots do that stuff, right? You got to be constantly churning, and they are never been in more of a position to get younger on defense than they are right now. And I do think that there is a sacrifice in the meantime, like in this 2025 season, particularly early in it. Yeah, you're given. I think Trey is probably going to be pretty good this year. I really worry about beyond that, and I don't think he's going to be happy without money beyond that. And I wonder if that becomes depreciating returns. If a pissed off Trey Hendrickson who holds out or doesn't play for a couple of weeks early in the season is worth it. Like if it's extend or trade, I'm trading. If you're just telling me you get Trey Hendrickson for the 1 more year left on his contract, he won't complain. He'll play and be great. Here for it. That's the move, right? I don't know that you're going to get that.
Wow.
And that's the question to me.
You really think there could be a real problem? Like he would be a legitimate headache, a legitimate problem if you just tell him to play football this year.
I think he's been pretty open about it. Like now last year he requested a trade and he was mad and it lasted like 3 hours and then had a career year and he was there at camp and he wasn't even there at the OTAs. He was even there with the country club kids. Like, and so I'm not even like, it's possible. Trey's he's really good for a reason. He's a little unhinged. Okay.
Yeah.
And I mean that in the nicest football terms, right? They call it, his nickname here was Blackout Trey. Okay. Cause he gets on he just gets on the field and it's like he just blacks out and you just don't even know what's happening out there. But that's kind of his personality. That's his personality, right? So what makes him, he's passionate. So is he going to be that right now and then be fine when it comes football season? It's a weird bet to take when you just went through what you went through last year with guys.
Here's a question for you. Like, say the Buffalo Bills call. Like they need a Trey Hendrickson.
No,
on
not
defense.
the Bills. They won't trade him to the Bills.
What if they give you a first round pick or some NFC
maybe
team?
I don't think that they're going to trade to somebody who they feel like they would direct, like in division, Bills, Chiefs, right? Like there's certain teams that would probably be off limits that they wouldn't pick up. But that's about it, I would think. I think the Bears make a lot of sense to me. who've been
Yeah.
trading a lot lately. They have extra. They have 39 and 41 and 7 and 10. They've got space. They're resetting. They're looking for attitude. They're clearly win now with you look at some of the moves they made with Tooney and Jackson that they traded for. Like if you're looking for teams,
Yeah.
that they're you're going to have one that has extra picks that they don't feel as uncomfortable parting with, as well as extending Trey, because that's just it. You're doing both for a guy who's going to be 31 in December.
You need the cap space.
Yeah.
Uh, all right. T. Higgins is on the tag, or he was tagged. Does he sign the
Yeah.
tag? Does he get extended? Because I think we can assume Jamar
Yeah.
Chase, they'll figure out a deal there. So what
They'll
happens
they'll
with
get
Higgins?
there. Yeah, they'll get there with Jamar. I think T gets done. I
Yeah.
do. Just everybody wants it. The timing on it might make people uncomfortable. I think the tag wasn't really a deadline because both sides knew he was going to get tagged. They weren't going to let him walk to free agency. Like players, like number one free agent never walks to free agency. That doesn't happen.
Right.
And so that was not going to be the case. But so it wasn't really a deadline. I think this weekend is a deadline before free agency is a little bit more of a deadline that might spur the action that they need to get there with him. And so I just think it gets done. It's rare that you hear everybody want it. Like T changed his agent mid-season. He dropped David Mulgeta and got Jamar's agent, Rock. So they share the same agent, Rocky Arsenault now, because he wanted to stay in Cincinnati. That's why, because he wanted to stay, and he knew the Bengals and Mulgeta would never get a deal done, ever. It was never going to happen. So he
Really?
changed as an attempt to stay. And he wants that, right? The Bengals want it. They recognize where they're at now. They weren't before, but with the way things fell this year, with Jermaine Burton blowing up in their face and other young players not quite developing, and T having a career year, and them needing more guys that can sort of be the example in the building, that do it right, get rewarded, draft, develop, retain examples. It's just the situation changed, and I just feel like everybody wants it. And when that's the case, you know how it is. Like it normally gets done. You're probably going to get some vague tweets in the meantime, and like some back and forth negotiation talk. But I just think it gets done. They all want it. So I think Jamar and T get done. And if I had to bet on it, I'd say they either force Trey into playing and he's okay with it, or they trade.
That's a strong breakdown, and you're right. I think that T. Higgins seems like a pretty smart guy too. How many of these receivers, year after year, chase a little bit more extra money? Does desire greener pastures in their own mind? I mean, we saw it in Green Bay with Greg Jennings. He goes to Christian Ponder in the Minnesota Vikings, and it just doesn't work out. He's got to know he's got a really good
Yeah.
thing right now going with Joe Burrow, Jamar
It
Chase, and the Bengals.
it's the Alvin Harper corollary, man. It's like he was like the original one you think of when you think of this, right? Try to go somewhere to do more, and it's not the same. And we've seen this happen here with tight ends. Burrow has turned these tight ends into like something, right? Every year, CJ Uzama, Hayden Hurst. It didn't quite hit with Irv Smith. Gesicki's had a good year this year, and then they do go collect more money, but then they fall off the face of the earth and you don't hear from them again. And it's like, and Travis Kelce has proved this a little bit too, in staying your value overall when you're always around the winner, when you're always in the big games, when you're putting your value to do everything else more than makes up for what you maybe think you made by going to go play with Christian Ponder. You know what I mean? In today's day and age where you can really benefit off of that financially, but that's for another hour.
Do you like just give us a player then? But before we sign off, like say the Bengals do exactly what you laid out, Paul, and you know, Jamar Chase is in Cincinnati long term. T. Higgins is in Cincinnati long term. You trade Trey Hendrickson. Al Golden has this ability to coach up some of these younger players. You're still going to need somebody on defense to scare you, to disrupt Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen. Do something. Rise up to a different level. Who's the best candidate when you look at the roster? If you're going to give these Bengal fans a little hope, who can realistically take that step on what was a historically putrid tackling like ass defense?
Yeah. um, I think they have a bunch of candidates. Um, I still feel like the person that who has been closest and you could see getting there. I don't know if maybe scary you wouldn't be the right word for a corner. I still think Cam Taylor Britt has been the closest to that when he's been on his game and been mentally right and felt playing confidently to being a real guy. So I think that's certainly one. They've got to go. I think partially they have to go find that, whether it's you're probably not going to find that in free agency. But I think you can find a grouping and you can have a pick. I mean, they need a disruptive defensive tackle is what they really need. And this draft, maybe that's where they get it. Maybe it's number 17 overall is where that comes from. But you know, this is not a 1 year fix. This is a how do we get this thing to average
It's true.
type of season. I think over the course of a couple of years you can find that guy. I don't think you're not gonna get it to where you want to in 1 year. I don't think. Maybe they do, but I don't see that.
And you do have Joe Burrow in his prime. It's not like he's this 35-year-old quarterback. So it would be good maybe to kind of think long term, rebuild for that next
Yep.
window. Fascinating stuff from Paul Dehner Jr., The Athletic. And I should have mentioned the name of your podcast at the top, The Growler. You can
There you
download
go.
episodes everywhere, right? Apple,
Yes.
Spotify,
Or
YouTube,
everywhere you get your podcast, YouTube. We're out there. We're out there, just like you are.
and absolutely need to get down there to Cincinnati. I'm still pissed. This entire 2024 season never made it down because next time I get down there, Paul, let's do another live show or at least get some more chicken at the Eagle,
Love
across from
it.
the stadium.
I'm in. I'm in. Love that.
Thanks so much for hanging
See
with
you,
us,
TD.
Paul. We'll catch you soon.
Later. See you.